Hello cat lovers. So today we are going to be painting a cat. I feel like I've been neglecting a lot of you cat lovers for too long. This is the first Persian cat tutorial I've ever painted, and it's been a while since we painted a calico. Hi, my name is Lauren Elizabeth with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art. If you're new here, welcome. I'm a certified art therapy practitioner and independent animal artist. So as I walk you through step by step in this therapeutic cat tutorial, I'm also going to talk about and give you encouragement around the topic of change, changing seasons, which can be scary. And by the way, just a sneak peek into next week's tutorial, you can expect one of Socks here, this little rambunctious kitty cat. All right, creatives, let's get started. Now, if you'd like to paint along step by step, I encourage you to check out the link to my Patreon down below. There I'll have the reference photo, which will not be on the screen, the traceable, a technique guide, journal reflections, material lists, and more. Beginning with our background, I'm going to add titanium white, fluorescent blue, sky blue will do just fine too if you don't have that. Next, I'll add some violet, and I'll be using a palette knife. Grab one if you have one, and we'll get mixing. So to pull out the yellows and the oranges, I'm going to choose a light indigo using a lot of white, fluorescent blue, and violet, and more blue than violet. Now, if you don't fancy this light indigo, you could always do a light blue or a light violet. You could do a lime green, or you could have any of those colors with neat designs in the background, stars, paw prints, sunshine, fall leaves. Since I'm painting this around fall time, we're using fall colors in the Calico cat. I'll talk about this a little bit more in this tutorial, but I just really want to emphasize the importance of creativity and not just technique. Yes, technique is important, but mix it in there with your own unique ideas, imagination, and inspirations. Okay, so we got our color here. I'm going to wipe off my palette knife and set it aside. And before I do any painting, I'm going to pray. Okay? Dear Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity to paint. I invite in your rest, your peace, your joy, just joy to flood our hearts, for just the excitement of being creative and color and animals, Father. Thank you so much for this day. Bless this time. Amen. All right, so to work on the background and the sides, I'm going to use my size 10 Arteza angle brush. These are my absolute favorite brushes that I use. I've been using since 2021, guys. These brushes have lasted that long and they're very affordable. So I have links to those brush packs down below. I use the detail brush pack and the variety pack by Arteza. And I'm just going to paint all around, and where you see the lines for the fur, I'm just going to cut up into those lines just like this, not leaving any white left. And I really don't want to have to come back to this color if I don't have to. Now, another way I really like to get my mind right when I'm painting is my breathing. Taking 5 deep breaths in through the nose and a long exhale out through the mouth. You ready? Let's do that 5 times as we paint our background. Now, I just want to also say, I know this is a cat painting tutorial. It's pretty heavy on technique, But I also want to share the theme behind this tutorial because I want to invite you to listen to those nudges to be creative, change up the color, change up the design, make this painting your own while also building your skills and technique. So the theme of this tutorial is embracing change. That word change, even if it's positive in your life, can still bring up a wide range of challenging emotions. Maybe it's the change of getting a new house and having to move into a new house. Maybe it's the change of getting a new job. Maybe it's a negative change, you just lost a loved one or a pet. So in this tutorial, in this painting, I'd encourage you to externalize these feelings. Maybe for you, it's feelings of grief or feelings of uncertainty or anxiety. Choose a color for that. Choose shapes for that. Designs or textures. Don't judge the outcome. Just kind of let it come out of you. Let it flow. I'm using this point again. This angle brush has such a wonderful point that helps us cut into those hairs. So we're not trying to get a perfect line here. It's really going to help us create that hair if we cut in a little further than what the sketch says. Okay, a little bit further than our traceable outline. Then we can layer the strands over top and it looks more natural that way and we don't have any white showing. I want to do the same thing down here, right along the chest, the left of the chest. Now, because the hair down here is so white, but there is some distinct shadows, that's, I think, what's going to help us. We have some strong shadows here. That way, these two values will not be competing. Now, I talk about value quite a bit in my tutorials, but in case you don't know, it's the relative lightness or darkness. So I'm not only talking about the color, so whether it's blue, black, green, or red, but how dark or light that color is. If the dominant value in that cat is very dark, I'm going to recommend a light or medium variation in your background. If your cat is very light in value, I'm going to recommend a medium and or dark value background. Sometimes I like, instead of just going with a boring one color background, I like to have like some areas be lighter, some areas be darker. So because this is such a dark fur on the back, it wouldn't make sense to also do dark purple here. It would actually make more sense to go white, and so I'm going to lighten that area up with straight white, blend it into that area before it dries, just to give it a bit more variety, not just have the same blended perfect color in the background. And it might clash too much if it was darker value, so that's why I'm going lighter, then darker. And I'm just going to blend that up and have it fade into the original color. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit whiter. What if I also added some lightness on this side? And if yours is drying, all you need to do is just pull in some of the wet paint to help you blend those areas together if your background is already drying. And then so this area can be a bit darker, this can be a bit darker, and I can just blend it until it fades into that value. Making sure I don't have a line of dark blue, or I guess in this case an indigo. And this isn't dark, this is a light indigo. And these light values will really complement the very dark values in the cat. What if I just did a corner, a little bit in this corner, but almost like partial part of it. So this is darker, but then this is lighter. So it's like a patch of lightness. I'm going back to the original color just to get this area up here so it fades nicely too. These values connect nice and smoothly. Going back in with white to blend up in this left corner. And why not? Why not a little bit right here? And then I'll go back to this original color to help blend it. Now I just want to be a little friendly reminder here. Whenever you hear that critical voice, whenever you feel like you're being completely disconnected from your body, come back to the present, come back to your body. Try and give yourself grace here. You're learning, you're growing, you will make mistakes. You want to make mistakes, and that's how we learn. Excellent. I'm going to wash off my brush and actually refresh my water. And we want our background now to be dry or get to the point where it's tacky so we can start working on the eyes, nose, and mouth. I find this just so much fun. Cat eyes are a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is, before I grab a paintbrush actually, I'm going to grab my black. And we're going to start with the dark gray. And we're going to outline the eyes with the dark gray and fill in the pupils. So I'm going to take just a tiny bit of white, and by the way, I'm using my size 0 spot brush and black. A spot brush for this sort of thing with the eyes is ideal. And with the clean damp brush, I want to make sure this is not loaded with paint. I'm going to wash it off, make sure it's clean and damp, so it's not sopping wet, especially with detail brushes where the water just kind of flows off. You don't want that, but you do want it damp. And I'm just going to outline the eyes, starting with the right eye. I'm having to put a little bit of water on it just because this canvas is sucking up the paint. So I just add a little bit of water just to help me push that paint around a little bit easier. I don't know if that's what's needed for your canvas. And then I'm going to use dark gray also to get in on this line. and then fill in the pupil. And doing the same thing on the left eye. Just mixing up some more dark gray and making sure my paintbrush is not loaded with water or paint. And all those little eye highlights will come once the eye is completely done pretty much. So we need to make sure that the pupils are dry then before we paint the area around it. Shouldn't take long because it's such a small little area, but we're gonna then mix up those iris colors, the colored part of the eye, and paint around these pupils. And because they're so big, we can really see a lot of detail in them. So we're going to be adding a good amount of detail to them. So wash this brush off. Continue working if you need to. I'm going to set that aside and grab the colors for the eyes. So first, raw sienna. Then yellow ochre, one of my favorite colors. Cadmium yellow. And guess what? Another color we'll be using is violet, and we already have that. So if you don't have enough, freshen that up on your paint palette and we'll get mixing. All right, so I'm gonna pull some white aside. I'm gonna mix up here. Let's start with our lightest color, which is gonna be cadmium yellow, white, and yellow ochre. Cadmium yellow, white, and yellow ochre. I'm gonna pull in a little bit more white in there and add more white to my paint palette. Get that nice and light and so sunny. I'll pull in a little bit more cadmium yellow. Next, let's pull some of that aside. Pull in more yellow ochre and raw sienna. Now, as I'm looking at my reference and I'm actually not trying to match colors. I'm trying to get them pretty close to it, but I'm also being very open, very flexible to colors coming up and mixing accidentally on my canvas. And also just falling in love with the colors I'm mixing and playing with them as I go. Paying more attention to the value that I'm seeing as opposed to trying to get the perfect color. So then I'm going to pull aside, and this is going to be on its own, so it's in its own pile, violet and raw sienna. The moment you can just allow yourself to be flexible with color, allow it just to be this playful act that really expresses your joy of the animal, that's when you start tapping into your superpowers. All right, so I think that is pretty darn dark, And so that's why I'm thinking we need one more color. I'm thinking that we need another color, orange. This is cadmium orange. Okie dokie. And I'm gonna do orange, cadmium yellow, and some white. These eyes are gonna be pretty detailed. It might be a little too light, so I'm gonna add in more orange into that. So it actually works out. We have two light values, a medium value, and a dark value. So this doesn't really pass off as a very light value like these do. It's right there in the middle, and here's our dark value. So I'm gonna recommend you have at least 3 core values, your dark, medium, and light, to work with when you're working on these different body parts. So by now our pupils are definitely dry. I'm gonna pick up my 3/0 round brush. All right, I'm gonna start on the darkest eye first. I like to start on the darkest part of the animal, the part of the face and the different elements. And so let's go in with, I'm gonna actually pick our dark value up and mix it in with some of our orange. And start painting that in this little corner here. We see often with cat eyes, we see shadows underneath the top of the eye. And then usually right below that shadow is where we start to see highlights. You will rarely, I don't think you'll ever have a shadow at the top of the eye and have a highlight in that shadow. It's just not possible. So this can kind of help guide you in placement of those highlights. Okay, I'm gonna wash off my brush, and while that's wet, I'm gonna blend in our color right here. And it might be too light, so we're gonna see. We're gonna test this out. Is this too light for this area? I don't think so. You don't want it to be too light, and I don't think it is. And so we'll paint in the rest of the white while blending in to that dark value, working carefully around the pupil. Now with cat eyes, you'll often get a lighter value like a ring around the pupil. Not all the times, but majority of the time that I painted cat eyes, that is the case. There's so much dimension and depth in cat eyes. So that's what I'm doing, just a ring around that pupil while blending that orange into this dark value. Going back to our dark value that we mixed up, and notice there's like now lines and texture in the eyes. Well, that's actually what I'm going to go back to our darkest value, not the one we mixed up. And on this left side, add like little dabs of lines and dabs that create that texture, but not inside the ring that we just painted. I'll even do it a little bit on this side too. Now creatives, just a reminder, at any point, if I go too fast, be sure to use the pause and play button on your screen. There's no rush, do enjoy yourself. I'm gonna get this area darker. It is just not quite dark enough, so I'm gonna pull in some violet. No one said we had to use dark brown to darken a color up. We can use violet or even blue. And so I'm using our dark value with some violet. And I'm gonna blend that in this corner to darken that up. Now, can I just share how fascinating cat eyes are? Did you know that cats have a hidden third eyelid for protection? Cats have a much wider peripheral vision than us humans. And that eerie cat eye glow that we see when light shines in a cat's eyes at night, it's this mirror-like layer behind the retina that reflects the light and then gets absorbed in the photoreceptor cells, actually helping to improve the cat's vision at night. I'm gonna grab, before this dries, our light value. This is the yellow And just get a little bit of that blended at the top of this left eye, just a little bit to lighten it up. I did go over some of that texture, and that's okay. We can add that back in. But for now, I'll let that be and move on to the right eye. Now this eye is getting a lot more light because of that light source hitting the top right. We have this area of the pet being very, very highlighted. And then the far left, much darker. And the nose being raised up is also creating a shadow in here. So let's fill in that eye. I'm gonna actually start with our medium value here. This is where we mix the cadmium yellow white with the yellow ochre and raw sienna. And I see that it's very dark on the top of the eye. I'm gonna start with those darkest areas first and then work from that. So starting from the top and working down and around. And adding some, oh yeah, there's definitely a bit of a shadow in here too. But they raise up a bit higher on this right side of the eye. And you notice we have a light value ring around the pupil, but then on the other side of it is this like line, this texture. So I'm gonna add little dabs with that line there and then blend it in with our lighter value, with the yellow. And I'm actually gonna add more cadmium yellow to that because I just think that's not quite yellow enough. And then work around that pupil and the rest of the white that we left. Try your best to keep the proportions of that pupil. You want symmetrical pupils as best you can, but if not, we can always touch it up with dark gray again. Now for you cat lovers, you cat owners, or maybe those of you who have lost a cat, don't you think that this cat stare, when they just look at you like this and stare, it means they trust you, it means they love you, it might mean they want pets, they want food, they want a treat, but it's usually not a sign of aggression. I think cats are so misunderstood because of their facial expressions and how they look at us, and I just really think this is a look of love. It's partly why I chose this photo. Even though they're the same colored eyes, I'm pretty sure it's just the shading and the light source affecting the eyes. I'm going to add a little bit more of our yellow around the pupil. The outline around this pupil is a bit more obvious than this one. I need to tone down that a little bit more. It looks a little on the creepiest side, so I'm going to create a glaze with a bit of orange. I'm going to get that more orange at the same time. So watering, I'm adding water to a pile and then orange. Not over the pupil, but around it. Getting this more orange and toning down the brightness of that ring. I'll go back to my dark value brown and just ever so carefully get some of this texture back in there around this left side of the right eye, of the left eye. And while I'm here, I can actually probably get away with adding a bit more of a stronger value shadow above this right eye. This is with this color that I have on my brush. Gonna pick up some more, just darken it up. This really adds that contrast. I'm going to go back with this color and some more orange because I actually think that this pupil's up a little too high. So I'm just going to bring it down a smidge, make it symmetrical to that one, and maybe bring it out just a little bit on the top like that. There we go. Now, do you notice there's a bit of a grayish, slightly pinkish outline around both eyes? You might not see it on the left eye, but I'm seeing it on the right eye. I will sometimes accentuate, emphasize that pinkness in that part of the eye. So what I'm going to do is grab, and this will help lead us into the nose, some permanent red. Okay, so I just added permanent red to my paint palette. In its own pile with my 3/0 round brush, I'm using white, permanent red, raw sienna, good amount of raw sienna. This is just another opportunity to add more color to your painting. And I don't want to make it too bright, so I don't have too much red in there, just a little bit more raw sienna and white, but a little bit of red. I want to get that lighter for this right eye. Gonna add more white to it to do that. All right, so without having too much water or too much paint on my brush, I'm gonna pick that up and outline this eye ever so carefully. Now it's okay if you get a big thick outline around there, because guess what? We'll just cover up the top of it if we went up too high with our fur. Just focus more on carefully gliding that brush around the almond-shaped eyes, not so much on the other side of it. I'm going to add a little bit of violet to that. Yep, I'm adding violet to darken up this area. It actually just a subtle shadow on this part of the eyelid. So I just need to add a little bit more violet to that. Get this a smidge darker. And that same exact color we can use to fill in this area right here. Maybe it's too dark, so I'm going to pull in a little bit of the original light pink. Yep, I need to blend those two areas together in this small little portion right here to the lower left of that right eye. So I'm going to go back to our original color. I'm just going to pull it in. That's the white, permanent red, and raw sienna. I'm adding more raw sienna to it now because this side is darker. And I'm going to test this out and make sure it's a darker value than the left side. Yeah, I think that'll do us. So that just had a lot more raw sienna in it, in the original mixture of raw sienna, permanent red, and white. And this is really going to give us some more information too, adding this about if we need to add more darkness to this left eye. I'm even seeing now as I add this slightly lighter value that we need more shadows at the top of the eye. Now, with many cats, you might not see that visible eyelid surrounding the eye, but when you do, I highly recommend painting it in when you paint those eyes. Doing your best to get the proper value for that eyelid will help you then, if you need to, adjust the values inside the eye. Either make it darker or lighter, like we're going to do here. I want to go back to the top of the eye with our dark value mixed with more violet to do exactly that. Darken up this part of the eye. We can really see that it needs that now. And if you need to, the bottom. And I'll go back to I'll actually add a bit of this yellow ochre mixture. I have a little bit of white that I left, and I don't want it too light. I'm just going to put it right there in the corner where I have some white spot. So into this brown mixture that we used for the eyelid, for the outer area of this left eye, I'm going to add more of our dark value. Because, for example, it gets much darker right inside here, and even violet. Let's add some more violet into that. So now, ever so carefully, leaving an even eyelid ring around the eye, I'm outlining it with this darker value. I really want to make that evident on this left eye because there's so many dark values on this side. So now I'm outlining that outline. Okay, with added violet to that brown pink. I know this is looking funny now, but it'll come together. And I'm getting rid of this part of the outline because it's so shaded with this darker brown violet. Even to about the center there is where I'm bringing that in. Okay, so I'm actually going over the eyelid on the bottom up until about halfway. I want to cover some of that up on that side. And even more so, this part of the eye is also getting less light. It's basically this part of the eye and that part of the eye that's getting more light, but where it kind of dips in because it's rounded eye, that's why it's a little slightly darker. And then I'm going to go back to my dark gray just to touch up some of that outline on this left eye that I went over right there. And even just a little bit here too. I can't wait to start putting in the brown fur around the eyes. It's going to be so fun. All right, so do you still have that dark gray? Because we need it for the next step. If you don't, let's mix up some more. That's black with a little bit of white. Same brush will do. 3/0 round brush. And I'm just going to fill in the nostrils. And now I will not outline the nose because working with a pink nose. If I was working with a black or a dark brown nose, then it might make sense to outline it with black or this dark gray. The only area I'm really going to outline is to the left of this nostril, inside the nostrils themselves, and then also to the left of the right nostril. That's it. Because all the others is a darker pink and different values of pink. That's what we'll be using for the rest of the nose. But before we do that, are your eyes? Are they dry? If they are dry, that's a great time to go in with those highlights. But I don't like to just use white yet. I like to go in with a light gray. So lots of white, little bit of black. And if you watch me, this strong light source is coming from the right. So on the right of both pupils, I'm going to add quite a large box, looks like a window. On this part, it doesn't even really hit the pupil. It's almost touching it. And we have a few other highlights. We have highlights, little dots now. I'm going to add, from what I see, 1 dot on this left pupil. And then quite a few, more like a dab on the left of the left eye. And then 3 dots, ever so carefully. 2 and then 1 on this left pupil. And if you need to reshape the largest highlight, we can do that now. So then I like to add in more white to that to strengthen the brightest, lightest highlights. And that's what going back in with over top the boxes we made on both eyes, that's where I'll go in with that white. And sometimes I'm seeing with this white, I am seeing a little highlight down here. Little highlight down there on the right eye. Oh wow, I actually see another highlight. I see another one that we can add, and it's in a very unusual place. It's actually right here, just to indicate some moisture on this eye. It's on the right side on the eyelid area. And what do you know? That doesn't stop there. There's actually a small little line, and this is a small little line right between the dark outline we made around the eye and the iris. Just indicating that watery eye that this cat has. But it doesn't go all the way up to that highlight up there, which is why I have to go back to my dark gray and touch that up. Excellent. So let's mix up our color for the nose. I am also going to add some orange to this cute little nose, something I don't often do. So I'm going to go with orange, permanent red, white. So that's permanent red, orange, white, and some raw sienna. Add a little bit more white there. And we have that dark side of the nose is the darkest, the left side of the nose is the darkest part. So what I'm going to do in such a small area, I tend to apply the medium value first, working at a good enough pace where I can blend in the dark value while it's wet. So it's a lot easier to do it this way, but you do have to work pretty hastily so that you can blend in wet into wet. That's what I'm going to do. Fill this in and then darken up the left side, lighten up the right side. Oh, and I'm leaving that area to the far right of the nose white, and that's we want that to be very highlighted. So I'm going to add white into that, the color we just used. Fill that area in that I left white and blend it nicely, especially on the far right of the nose. Another area we can add this light value. Do you still see that line? If not, it just goes straight up from there, and to the left of that line is where there's a highlight. Might have to do a few applications to actually see it. To the left of that line and up a ways. And before that left side dries, I'm going to add some raw sienna and a tiny bit of violet to this left side of the nose. I'm going to wash off my brush so that I can blend that in without adding more of the colors, so that I can just blend it carefully. Now going back to my dark gray, you might not need this, but I do. I want this line to go up straight and up a little past this part of the nose. And now for that dark line that goes all the way down to the cute little mouth that we could just barely see any of that opening. We do see that it's pink. So I'm into this mixture of our raw sienna, permanent red, some orange and white. I'm going to add more permanent red, tiny bit of white, and I'm going to add some black. And very, very carefully draw a line down. I'm going to take the top of it and have it kind of fade at the top with a damp, clean brush, and then just touch it up a little bit right there. Now, depending on how you're feeling, how much of this cat you want its mouth to be open, maybe you want it closed, maybe you want it slightly open. I'm mixing up a pink, permanent red and white. I think I need to add some gray too. Yep, tiny bit of gray. I'm gonna have it just slightly open. That's a little too gray. So I'm going to try and keep putting more pink back in there. So you do the eyes, the nose, the mouth. If you have an open mouth, you would do the teeth and the inside of the mouth, then the ears, okay? And because it's a calico, you often see ears looking quite different too, with markings even inside and around the ears. So what I'm gonna do is pull some of our yellow ochre mixture. We're gonna go back to using some of that for the inside of the right ear, add some permanent red to that and white. Give it a bit more of a pinkish tone, and I'm gonna need more white. But not too much because this is the inside of the ear, but the light source is hitting it, so it's more of a medium value than anything. Okay, and now the left ear, it almost looks like all brown. So I think we'll use this color to literally fill in that whole ear, and then we can add in the strands, inner ear hairs into that. So I'm going to use one of my favorite brushes. Ironically, it's called the Cat's Tongue brush, size 8 by Arteza. And let's start on that right ear first. I'm going to use this pinkish yellow to paint in the ear. I'll go down pretty far. We're going to layer fur over top with our browns. And I'm going to get a little bit darker inside there, which is why I'm going to blend in some of this brown. You'll get some, there's not as much light getting in there because of the hair, because of just the way that it's angled, the ear, and so it makes it hard for light to get in there. So it's going to be slightly darker most often. I'll get all the way up to the top of the ear, and then surrounding it is going to be the brown. But before I do that, I actually want to go on with some white into this color. I'm actually using my 3/0 round brush again. Lighten up, and at just corners will do. And some yellow. Let's pull in some yellow to that. That's the yellow mixture with white and some of that pink brown or yellow in a corner. And there's pockets in cat ears, and so this is sort of hidden, but it's there. I'm skipping this area, going up from there with this light value, adding more white to it so I can get that lighter, so it really stands out. Doesn't go all the way up, but about there. Might need to add a few layers for it to stand out. And it's also on the other side of this little pocket too. This pocket that's like the Henry's pocket right here on cats. Right there too. And better that you get real close to this edge, leaving just a very thin amount of white so that we can just bring it down a little bit more if we need to with the brown when we paint this brown. So I'm going to set this brush aside, grab my Cat's Tongue brush, make sure it's clean and damp. And let's go in with our brown. I'm going to test this out, see if this will do. And I definitely think it will. I'm just going to paint in this whole ear. This side is definitely darker. This area is going to need to be darkened up. We'll use probably our violet for that to darken it up. And these ears are somewhat pointy, so I'm going to use this brush just to create a little bit of a tip and back down. Some cats have very, very rounded ears. Some are very pointy. I know Maine Coons sometimes have little fuzzy hairs on the ends of them. I'm just going back with this brown just to bring this down far enough. Better to go down too far than not far enough. And then what I'll do is go in with some violet into this brown and darken up this side of the ear, which is getting the least amount of light, and it's brown. And the brush I'm using is my round brush, my 3/0 round brush. Now there's a bit of my background color that I'd missed, and that's why I'm going, luckily I have some still damp, and I'm going back right along the ear. So with that brown and the same brush, and actually with the added violet to it, I am going to do it on this ear now. And there really isn't a whole lot of hair. This is like a relatively short-haired cat or well-groomed cat, and there's not much hair sticking out on this ear. Maybe just a few strands, but not very much. Sometimes you have tiny little strands coming up from the sides, but I'm not seeing it on here very much. At the bottom here, when we get to the head, it will be. And another thing is too, this is often a little bit thicker. So this brown, I'm going over some of this pink brown, but then it thins out at the top. And we do have a few hairs, just a very few on the tip. Very subtle. And now I'm going to carry the brown down. And you know what? It might look a little funny here because we have this line on the ear. So what I'm going to do is go back to our pink, blend that in with some of this brown violet. Oh, that's a little too dark. Go back to that pink. It doesn't really show if it's brown behind here or pink. So I'm going to do a mix of both. And the hair that we layer over top those inner ear hairs will kind of cover up any mistakes or any questions about whether or not this is brown or pink. I won't go over this highlight, but I'll bring it down a little bit far along the side of it. And if you need to, even go back to add that highlight. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm going back with the highlight and cutting in with some hair, okay? So that gets rid of that line there too. Some clusters of lines that kind of look like hair. So that was with our permanent red, raw sienna white on this side, and a little bit of yellow. Remember we added a little bit of yellow to that? If you're not seeing it now, once it dries, you can add another layer just to make it stand out. I'm going back to our dark value brown to thicken up the base area a little bit more. So what I like to do once I've completed the eyes, nose, mouth, and nose and ears is I work on the darkest side on the fur of the animal. And that's on this side. So that's what we'll be doing next. I'm going to use this brown, but I'm going to pull it aside and add some raw umber. So I'm adding raw umber to my paint palette. I'll also be using a clean, damp, size 8 Arteza cat's tongue brush. And this is a very flat, loose layer, but we still even add some texture. Okay, so with my cat's tongue brush, I'm going to add some texture, but mostly fill in with a mixture of our brown that we mixed up and raw umber. So we're going to start on that left side. And notice where this marking is. Not really a marking, but the brown side of the face stops about here. I'm going to use a line to indicate that. It's a rough line right there. And now work up from there. I'm going to get pretty far along the outer border. So what I mean by that is I am using the point of my cat's tongue brush to do that, but I'm going to tidy up the fur with my much smaller detail brushes later. But this is the darkest part, so that's why I'm using the added raw umber on this side. So here we go, starting to talk more about calico cats and the Persian cat specifically as well. When it comes to creating these markings, I recommend starting with the most dominant, strong, dark color first, adding a flat base layer, and then slowly start lightening up your layers, stacking them one after the next over top that base layer, doing the same for the larger, lighter colors of the calico, and then going back in with your single strands and those smaller patches over top, going from dark to a little bit lighter each layer, and then to your lightest values on the top layers. And as I was just motioning with my hand, we're also paying attention to the direction the fur is laying, even in this base layer, which in this side is going down and to the left. Now this kind of cuts into the side of the muzzle and then gets much darker. Oop, I went over that a little too far. I don't want to go over that too much. I want that line to stay there. I'm going to switch brushes now so I can get a bit smaller. Just while I get into between the eyes, in and around that left eye with my size 1 round brush. Make sure it's clean and damp. Okay, gets darker here. Now just a little bit with this brush in the opposite direction, I'm cutting into the bridge of the nose on that left side a little bit. We're going to add very short little hairs on that side when we paint the bridge of the nose. You see how there's almost like this line? It's like darkness. I'm going to actually create another line symmetrical to that. It's almost like stripes, hidden stripes there that goes up like that. All right, so then I'll go back to my cat's tongue brush, fill in a bit more brown. Get this area nice and dark here. You can't really see much, it's just very dark in by the ear and this part of the face. And as I go up, the strands are now more vertical, okay? Just mixing up some more. And notice it's not straight. It kind of is a little wavy on the head. Goes up and then kind of comes down again and back up again. So we've joined it all the way to the opposite side now. But before I do that, I'm going to get my brush strokes in the right direction on this left side. Now I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna now to my raw umber. I'm run out of my other paint, but this is actually great timing with raw umber and the burnt umber. So that's raw sienna and burnt umber. That's raw sienna and raw umber that I'm using. And with this brush, I'm going to carefully paint underneath this left eye and some blending, but getting this area a little bit lighter. See how we're not adding too much detail right now? We're kind of just blending and placing. But because this area is a bit of created a shadow, the area to the left of that, with my raw umber and my 3/0 round brush, so this has a lot more raw umber in it now. To make that consistent, that little shadow is going to fit right here. And I'm going to go around this outer part, this outer border of the eye once again with this brown. Even flows down here, going out like that. It kind of comes down a little bit further underneath the left eye. I'm going to go back to add some more raw sienna to this raw umber. So even more than I've added, and just get this a little lighter above that outline. So now with this lighter brown, I am trying to indicate fur texture, making it look like just slightly highlighted dark brown fur and seeing a little bit more of that line texture. Now switching directions beneath that left eye down into the left again, and I'll even pull that light down a little bit further to the left of the muzzle. Now I'm going to move to the right, covering up more brown than I need, because the brown is like the prominent color on the face, and all the other lighter colors will paint over top the brown where we've added too much of it. So let's just mix up. It's going to get lighter on this right side, okay? So that's why I'm going to add some raw sienna with this raw umber, but a lot more raw sienna than raw umber. And this comes down on the forehead and to the right of it. Now see how I've gone too light, all right? So let's bring in some more raw umber so it joins with that color. Just got a little too light, too soon. And we have, this brown comes down, but then small little tiny hairs of different colors come into that. Do you see that? How there's this tiny little hairs of different colors. We'll paint those in a little bit. So now right under here, it gets darker again. So I'm going to need to move to my brush, my smaller round brush. But before I do that, just like I did over here, but going in this direction now, swishing my brush back and forth, these horizontal brush strokes that are somewhat pointing to the right and down. Now I'm going to go over some of my work above that right eye just because it's a little on the light side, but as I do that, I'm going to make sure my brush movement is in the same direction that fur is laying above that eye. So that's what I'll do. Go back to my round brush, mix up some more of my raw sienna with raw umber, add more than I need, and working carefully around that outline around the right eye. And now, if you notice, this brown is actually going to go under and over some of that pink brown that we did, okay? So I have some around here, but it goes up over top this part of it. And I'll carefully work above and around the right side of this eye. And again, it's actually pretty thin above the top part. So I'm going to thin it out a little bit more than I have it. That eyelid around it. Oops. Oh, well, actually that fits there. Ironically, that actually works. There's like a little corner that kind of goes in a little bit on that right eye, and I didn't mean to do that. So that's right above that little highlight that we added to the right eye eyelid. Just pulled some brown in there. Now before I do anything, I think I need to add a little slight shadow. So I'm going to do a glaze of what the brown we're just working with lots of water. Because as I'm outlining around the eye, it jumps out at me. And that glaze will go right here. Okay, and guess what? I'm going to just accentuate the shadows we added before even more underneath right here. Glazes are just amazing. They can transform anything. It's like those final touches with the glaze that really brings a painting together. You can add a tint of a different color. You can alter the value like we're doing here, just making it darker around the eye. I'm going to also, once more, darken up this part of the eye on the left side. And right here too, with this glaze. Now I don't notice this until much later in this tutorial, so I'm going to say keep using that glaze that we were just using in the upper left of the left eye over that eyelid. It's just a little too prominent, a little too light, so darken up the value by adding that brown glaze to the left of that left eye over top the eyelid. It's going to help so much. Then after you've applied that glaze, I'm going to put in more raw sienna into our raw umber and raw sienna mixture, getting that slightly lighter. And notice how we have little patches of like orange and light brown. We'll add those in after we paint this, but I'm getting a little bit lighter. Is that too light? Too light. I want this side to be lighter, but not that light, so it's a fine balance. I'm going to have to find it as I paint over some more of that white. Yeah, that's just right. So you want it just slightly lighter than up here. And now, without perfection here, I'm just gonna cut in to the side. Also looking at this side, trying to make it symmetrical. And also noting that we're gonna use a smaller detail brush to really clean that part up. Let's just draw a line now where this ends. This ends like right there. And so I'll paint up from it. So now my brush strokes are up and down at an angle this way because of that, the way the fur is laying. And let's get it slightly darker, but guess what? I'm gonna go in with my raw umber and not paint the whole thing. Look at this. I'm actually going to like box in just a little bit of the cheek. Do you see this like somewhat invisible line? It's almost, this part is highlighted, but it goes up and it actually comes out a little further than I have it, but that's okay. We can shape that part too. But this part is a bit darker. So if you're not already looking at the reference inside this Calico Cat download, I highly recommend it. So what I'm gonna do is add some more raw sienna to that and extend this out. See what I'm doing? Do you see that little cheek? Rounded cheek with my more raw sienna version of this brown. I'm even going to add some over here so I can help. This will help me make both sides symmetrical. I'm even adding some up here, just shaping this face with this raw sienna and raw umber, but more raw sienna than raw umber. So if it helps you, look at where that white we left for the muzzle area is. Now just create a line up from that to the eye, just a curving line. That's kind of where I'm leaving that lighter brown to create the cheek. And I'm just gonna be working down now, but you'll notice I won't create much for texture at all. I'll even be using a line to cut off where that brown stops, where it ends on the face, because this is supposed to be layered over top the chest area, that shoulder area. So I wanna just paint as much as I need, work on that shoulder, get it completed, then use my liner brush to layer fur strands over top. This is why painting pets, painting cats, if that's what you want to improve on, you must paint lots so you can understand the order in which you need to layer so that it looks more realistic and creates that depth. Just brought that up on the ears a little higher so that I can make this more balanced. Excellent. So do you see that there's just a slightest lightness on the side here? We'll get to that after we paint the dark back. And this is just the same color. I'm actually going to make this a little bit more raw umber than raw sienna though. Swapped. Working just in this whole area right here. And if you brought it down when we were blending with the white into there, let's just bring this up a little. And this is not a long-haired cat, so this is almost going to be just a slightly fuzzy line. This is definitely not a perfect straight line, but almost. There's a little bit of a curve, and I'm going to get a little bit of line texture there too. And if you're using a sided canvas, also we're going to go off the side of our canvas. All right, so how the direction of the fur now on this side that's layered over top here is down and to the right. So I'll get pretty high up there with this brown cutting up into that so that we can then layer the lighter fur over top. Always got to think about which top layer is affecting the other layer, the direction of the fur, the value. There's a lot of things. What I say to creatives often is just shoot for 1% better with each next portrait that you do. 1%, you can definitely do that. Ooh, and do you notice I'm accidentally getting lighter down here, but that is actually good, which is why I'm going to pull in more raw sienna than raw umber down here. I'm going to emphasize that lightness. Just make it a little bit more light brown down there than dark brown. Now I just want to share a really encouraging verse that is connected to this painting's theme, embracing change. It's from Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. You might be in a season of both enormous transition and you're still waiting. You're still waiting on that baby. You're still waiting on that job. You're still waiting for that spouse, or you're still struggling with addiction and just waiting, just praying. Well, just remember and tuck this away in your heart from this verse that God is actively taking that initiative to bring about good changes that bring renewal, that bring transformation for the better, that bring restoration. He can and he will if we continue to seek him, not perfectly, his provision, his guidance, and his refreshment in those most desolate and hopeless situations. Because he is the source of all things, he can provide that sustenance where there is none. He can provide so much life in those barren places. And because he is so mighty, he is so capable, he is so loving and faithful, sometimes these big transitions, these big changes in our lives are the boat to get us to the promise. They're the vehicle at which he wants to take us there. And sometimes we cannot see it because we feel like we're drowning on the boat in this change. So one more time, I'm going to go in with my raw umber. Just frame this. This is just the raw umber and raw sienna. Just add another layer and also reshape that part. And guess what? I'm also going to bring some of that down in towards the raw sienna highlight there with more of the raw umber in it. So now as you're working on that Calico Cat, I just want to give you some journal questions to reflect on. Number 1, in what ways are these changes going on in your life forcing you to grow? Question number 2, in what ways do you feel like you're being prepared and developed for the next season? I'm going to go back with my raw sienna, more raw sienna than raw umber. Get that more highlighted. I'm going back another layer with my raw umber and raw sienna on the back. And more raw umber than raw sienna. At the top, but not at the bottom. All right, so this is so fun. We're gonna go in, I'm using my 3/0 round brush. I'm gonna grab in a separate pile raw sienna with our yellow ochre mixture. Wanna lighten that up a little bit. And first what I'm gonna do is apply this. I'm gonna test it out, is that dark enough? It's actually not dark enough, but what I'm gonna do is place it down, create that marking, and then darken it up while it's wet. If it's small enough and you don't have a ton of it covering, that's kind of how you can work. Medium value first, and then darken it up. So I'm going to take this. Remember, we're leaning more on the dark side than the light side. And I know it does get light up here, but we can add those light strands later. I'm going to paint in above the nose, and it's kind of like halfway on the nose and down. And by the way, no one said you can't alter the markings a little bit. If this is for a client and they really want you to be precise about every single marking, then that's one thing. But you can also just take cues and the information you get from the reference photo and do your own thing for markings. I've done things where I've made markings into hearts before. So that's a fun thing to do. And this one comes down where we have that black line underneath the nostril and back up again. And so now I'm going to add some, I'll do some raw umber. So just a little bit of raw umber on my brush. Very carefully just to get this shadow in there. It's not that there's a marking here, it's just that it's not getting as much light on the left side of the face. So I'm just doing lines to get to blend and create that texture. And it actually carries to the center of the nose. Goes up as well. And over. All right, so going back to our yellow and raw sienna mixture, going back up again. And I think I can actually bring more brown down before I go up any further. So I'm going to go straight, because there's already raw sienna on this mixture of the brown that we did. I'm going back into that color to bring more of it down, cut into some of those yellow browns that I just added. Now we definitely have one, even though the face is not straight, right here is like the center. Right here is like the center. And that is where I see some darkness. So this is raw umber with very little raw sienna on it. Taking that to the center. Another area where it's dark is where I originally made that line. Doing another clusters of lines going up that line as well. And then another one that's pretty dark is on the right side where I also made that line. This one's kind of patchy because of the light and dark, like the light browns and whites that are in between and around it. But now I can start moving over that way. So I'm going to mix up some more with our yellow and raw sienna. All right, so where this goes, I'm going to start, this is a little on the dark side. I can actually make it a bit lighter, but I'll get there. I'll first lay down this more yellow brown, and then we'll get lighter over top of it. I want to use that to start working over to the right above this right eye. And it's patchy, so it's not just an area we fill in. So over top that dominant base, when I'm painting these calico cats, I'll have some areas of clusters of lines that create a unique shape, and then other areas that are just single lines with that lighter color. But because these lines are much lighter, it really stands out. So make sure you have that base color somewhere near, so in case you have to clean it up and cut in around those lines. And sometimes with those lighter colors, you have to add just a little bit of white so it shows up over those really dark dominant colors. It doesn't take much white, maybe just a little will help it stand out more. I have that dark value there. I'm doing a few sporadic lines to the right of that. And I'll go up a little ways here around the center of the head. And back down. So before that dries, let's get that color down here. So underneath the nose and slightly inside that nostril. I'm going to create the shape of it first and then I'll fill it in. So I'm going to make this very organic circle that comes down on that lip, pretty much almost all the way down, and a little bumpy at the bottom, and then I'll fill it in. I'm going to create a bit more texture on the outside of this blob looking shape using lines to cut in. And then while that's wet, I'm going to pull in this yellow color, this light value we used for the eye. I'm going to start blending that in while it's wet. Not all the way into that nostril, but right almost and around, blending it in so it lightens it up. And this is a great opportunity to also add this vibrant yellow. Oh, and I'm actually not going to add it with this brush. I'm going to add it with the liner brush. Size 0 liner brush. And line after line, I'm going to go over in the proper direction. It really matters about direction now. And by the way, I want this more yellow. This is like more leaning on the yellow side. Line after line, over top some of the browns and even over top some of the dark browns. So the light browns, or I guess the medium browns, and the dark browns. When your brush gets too thick, you wash it off, make sure it's clean and damp, pull some of the water off so it's not dripping, and then go back. These lines kind of like curve around the dark fur. See that? It's like curving around, up and around. So that's just going too light too soon, so I'm going to jump to our mixture of the cadmium yellow and white with the yellow ochre and raw sienna, mixing that in with a little bit of that lighter yellow on my brush, toning it down a bit so it's not as light. And remember, it's almost like this is a separate area because it's almost like disconnected from the brown behind it. which is why I'm coming down a little bit more above the eye. And look, there's even a few strands directly above the eye that I can get. See that? Just a few little wisps above it. And while I have this brown yellow, I want to get a little bit more of this part highlighted with more yellow, just like this one. Even add a little bit more. Like, let's just add a little bit more than I'm seeing. So what I'm going to do is go in with this yellow and add more of the raw sienna so we can darken it up. And I'm going to add some random lines that are going in this direction now, above the left eye, strand after strand. But as I move over to the left and before this dark strip here, I'll start adding a slightly lighter yellow, slightly more yellow into that. It's just too thick. I need to get that lighter. So after applying that dark value base layer, it's not only important to go in with the single strands for the colored fur, but also to highlight that dominant fur and not just leave it flat. We need to add a bit more texture. So that's what I'm gonna do with the more darker yellow mixture. I'll add more raw sienna to that so that I can highlight that brown fur to the left of the eye. If your value is just too light, it's too similar to the patchy light areas above the right eye, you need to make it darker. Add in more raw sienna or even in some raw umber. And notice how I'm leaving a gap directly to the left of that left eye. That's kind of where it curves inward, and then the highlighted, the raised up fur is getting highlighted here. So it does get actually much lighter here though. I'm going back over where we originally made it lighter. I'm getting it even lighter. The hair is kind of displaced that way. And you know where else I'm going to do that? Add that right here. Get that a little lighter. So I am adding some of the yellows in there. Not too many, just a few. And guess where else? I'm going to add more raw sienna to another area. Raw sienna with this yellow. Just a little bit right in the forehead. And even some more in the center. Like random lines of brown. And I'll pull this out more. Working a layer behind it, working behind it now. I'll work above. Oh yeah, that helps. Doesn't it help so much? Adding it above on the top of the head. when I get to the left side of the top of the head, the direction changes. Now they're going up and to the left. I'm going to go back with my light yellow, get a few more layers of lines on this marking. Very careful lines. Oops, that was if you get it too thick like I just did, go back with your raw umber and raw sienna, and you can just paint a right alongside it, just to clean it up just like that. I also see a little bit of this darker yellow, the medium value. I'm going to add a little bit more than needed right here. Just feel like adding a bit more of those yellows to pull out the background purples. And a little bit more yellow too. Just added some yellow. And notice I'm adding them in lines once again. But just to make that blend into the darker browns a little bit more, I'm using my raw umber and raw sienna mixture just to cut down into that. And while we're working with that brown, let's mix up some more, and still with this brush, let's go around the outside, shall we? Where we carefully, with our browns, unless you want to add another layer to your background, I don't think I need it. Unless you want to, because I would recommend finishing your background completely, then doing this. Adding line after line, cutting over top that background, going in the right direction. That will really help bring this animal forward. Remember how it's not straight too? It goes up and then down and then back up again. Man, I just love painting cats. There's just something so fun. And now for the left side. Be careful as you're resting your hand on this area that you don't smudge anything if it's still wet. Sometimes it gets too thick and it can be hard to make just fine lines, and so you wash it off, pull off the paint, or water, I should say, the water so it's not dripping, and then go back to it. This paintbrush does not hold much paint or water, so you're going to have to go back quite a few times to your paint. And another place is right in front of the ears. Now I'm actually not going to paint this side because of how much my inner ear hairs are behind that hair and how much we want to layer over top that. So I'll just do the bottom since I'm here. All right, so I have a fresh palette here that's all nice and clean. I'm gonna add white and black. We're gonna stick with these colors, working on the white for now, for a little while, and then we'll go back to this. All right, so we're working with white fur. So our dark values and our medium values, and especially our light values, are gonna be light. We don't want to make them too dark. So I'm going to start with the dark value with lots of white and black. And notice, because of that light source coming from the top right, that we have strong values, dark shadow values right here and over here, and even a bit around the chin. I'm going to add a bit more black to that. And here's the thing, we don't want it too dark also, because then we'll have competition between these values, the background color. So I'll pick some of that up, add some more white to it. This will be our medium value. And I need to make enough space for the other colors later. I don't want to just spread out all my paints in just this one step. And then for white, or I guess the lightest value will be almost white. I have a little bit of this medium value on my palette knife, and I'm just adding white. So we have our dark, medium, and light. And we can adjust these once we test them out in case we need to make them a bit darker. So because we have quite a bit to cover of surface area, I'm going to start with a relatively large brush for this. My size 8 cat's tongue brush, make sure it's clean and damp. All right, so I'm going to start with those darkest areas on the darkest side of the face, just like we did with the brown. And let's just begin in that darkest area right here. Let's test it out. That should do it. That's not too dark, not too light. And I'm cutting up into these lines here because they're going to be layered over top. And I'm not going to paint in the fluff that's kind of rolling around that collar. There's a collar here, and we only just see the bell. I'm not going to paint that in now. I'm going to create a flat layer, work the area underneath it, and then we can add those layers over top. And I am not going all the way to the edge because I'm going to be using my liner brush for that. And we'll actually do it very soon while it's wet. And it's not this perfect circle because this cat's body is positioned that way, pointing that way, facing that way. And that's why this will dip down a little with the shadow and then kind of come back up. So we're gonna go back to here, working at a steady pace, guys, because we don't want that to dry on us. I'm gonna grab my liner brush, my size 0 liner brush, and I'm gonna grab my medium value. And cutting over top with angled lines down and to the left with my medium value, and blending into those grays that we just painted, I'm gonna paint these lines up into that shadow. Now this is a short-haired Persian cat, and so these lines aren't that long, but they do get slightly longer as we move closer down to the chest. Around the back and belly area, that's where the fur is usually the longest. I'm going to make sure I have a clean, damp, size 8 cat's tongue brush. Going back to my dark value. Oh, I lied. Not going back to that dark value, going to the medium value. And we are going to do the same exact thing, but with the point of this brush, because we actually want to do a bit more blending than just layering like we did here. We did a little bit of blending there. But I also want to start blending with the point of this brush into some of those grays, so it's a nice fade from dark to light, while also covering up more white below it. I'm going to go back to my dark value so that I can blend that even more with some of the medium value on my brush. Now I have the medium value on my brush, the medium gray. See how I'm just kind of pushing up the lightness a little bit, but not too much, and while getting in that fur texture. All right, now with the medium value, I'll go up along the side here and using the point of that cat's tongue brush so I don't have any white left, and then after, we'll layer that dark fur over top. All right, so with brush strokes that are kind of going down and to the right, that's what I'll do over here. But no need to make these lines perfect because we're gonna fix it up with our liner brush. Now to create a little bit more texture and to indicate that the fur kind of goes down and in a little bit and towards that chest, I'm going to do a mix between our dark and medium value. So not super dark, but right there in between our dark and medium value so that we can get that base, and then we'll be adding fine lines that are slightly lighter over top. So I'm covering up more white while creating that texture and also blending. That is what I'm trying to do, but not too much where you can't see that texture. So it's just that happy balance and not going over the dark brown yet. I'll do that again, picking up that mix between the dark and medium value. It looks no different here, right? But then when we add it to the white canvas or paper, we can really see the difference in the gray value. And we want to start dark and then slowly progress to light. So now I've just got my medium value, just the medium value, not the mix, on my brush. For our next step, I'm going to switch to our size 0 Arteza liner brush. I'll go back to my liner brush because I do want to bring this up. I want to bring this up so that I can carefully bring it down without losing proportions. So I'll go to my dark value actually, the dark value gray. Before that dries, and it will dry darker. So as you're applying this, it might be like, oh no, this is a different color, but it's just because it dries a shade darker than what it looks like wet. I don't have to bring it up too far, but just so that I can layer nicely with those other layers. That's also why we're doing the chest area before the face, because of that will be layered over top the chest. All right, so here I go with my clean damp. Let's just make sure it's clean and damp liner brush. And yes, we're going to our almost white light value. And what I'm gonna do, ever so carefully, not too much paint on my brush or water, is I'm gonna layer those strands over top the brown. Roll off some of the paint on your paint palette if that helps you keep it a thin amount of paint. And as I work down, usually around the stomach area, the back, you're gonna get longer fur. And that's why I'm making my lines slightly longer. It doesn't just go straight up into that face, there's a bit of a curve. So I'm gonna extend out that curve a little bit more up here and the hairs. Excellent. And then from there, I'll be working up with my lines. Working up on that side from the right to the left. Stacking these strands one at a time, leaving gaps in between so we can still see a little bit of that medium value. Like right here is where it's the lightest, right there. So that's where we want the lines clustered more closely together to get it looking almost white. But as we move to the left, those gaps are going to get a little wider. and they're stacked over one another. So I'm not just making a perfect row and a perfect row. I'm kind of having them clustered together, and some that are below, some that are above. You can see I'm going back over some of my work on this right side. And then I'll make a mix between the medium value and the light value. And I'll start working over and up a little higher too. Gotta wash off my brush so it doesn't get too thick with paint. In fact, let's get my palette knife so I can mix up those two values a little bit better. Medium value with the light value. So do you notice you can still see the medium value, but because we're leaving gaps in between, we barely see it. And even more on the far right, there's a lot more white because of that light source. This is what is going to help create this texture and depth. And that shadow comes at an angle, okay? So I'll be working up at that angle with some lines cutting in there. Cutting up higher. I don't want to leave just this line of shadow. That doesn't look very natural, so I'm bringing them up, making an uneven, invisible line. And I'll stack them below now. I'm just going to lengthen these lines, these medium value lines that cut over top our indigo background ever so slightly. And back down again now. There's still some more medium value that's very visible here. We want to add some more texture over top of that. I'm going to go to my light value again, and I'll do another round of light value layers. So there's still more layers needed at the bottom here around the right area of the chest. Getting that lighter and then bringing it up also at the same time, stacking those lines. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to just actually pull in a little bit of this dark value in with the light value. And if you watch me, I'm just going to create this fluff that's kind of being pushed up around the collar, underneath the chin. I'm doing lines in different directions as I work over. And you notice here, this hair kind of sticks up, curving over like that around the collar. And it's a bit longer. And there's other hair that kind of lays in the opposite direction. And then hair that's covering up a lot of the collar we can't see. So this fur is going to be a little bit longer, come down a little bit longer as well, and still be kind of curving. And I'm going to just subtly connect that to the lighter areas to the right of the chest. And just a few strands that connect it to this chest area. There's just a few lines that are connected to it. I'm going to have to go back to my dark value because it's getting a little too light here. There's a few slightly curling strands, like slightly curly like that. And I'll go over a little bit more just to get that a little lighter. So all I did was just add a little bit more of the light value to that to make it a little bit lighter. Now adding a bit, I'm going to mix up more. I'm just mixing up the dark value with our lightest value. I want to get that light because I'm also going to lighten up this side and start bringing it up. I'm going to carefully climb these lines up a little higher, but not covering up too much of that medium to dark gray where we're going to place the bell right here, like the side of the bell. So we don't want to pull these lines up to that point, just below it. I'm going to go back to my lightest value. I'm going to check to see if this is too light. I think we can actually get away with it if we just put it on the end, but any further up wouldn't make sense. It's just too light. But I'll go back to this medium value for these strands here, the mix between the dark and the medium gray. All right, I'm going to go back to the light value. I'm going to pull in a bit more of the light values over to the left. If you need to, I'm actually mixing a little too much of the gray in there, so I'm going back to add white to that. And here I go, adding some raw sienna and yellow ochre to my paint palette. We'll paint that little bell. All right, so for bells, these are the colors I go with: white, black, raw sienna, and yellow ochre. I like to just create the shape, the circle first, with black, raw sienna, and some white. Let's get that pretty dark. So that's black, raw sienna, and white. And I am using my liner brush just to mix this up. And I don't even see the full bell, I only see part of it. And I'm gonna place it right here, this almost half circle. So I'm gonna create what looks like a backward C, and then I'll fill it in, but not covering up all that hair that is covering up the side of it. Then what I'm going to do is pull in a corner of that some yellow ochre and white. And some raw sienna. So into a corner of this I added yellow ochre, white, and raw sienna. And now on the top left of this bell, I'll start blending this color in, but not all of it. And now I'm going to add some white to that. So we have our dark, medium, and light, and blend that at the top, but smaller now. So it's not as big. I'm going to wash off my brush with a clean brush with a little bit of moisture on that, just to push that highlight around and blend it at the same time. Now it is pretty low where I put that bell, so I'm going to improvise a little bit. I'm going to add just the top of it here. And do I want to add a collar? Now it would definitely still work if you wanted to add the side of a collar, like on the left side, but that's entirely up to you. I'm going to still try and pull some fur over top of it and not add a collar. So I'm going to mix up a mix of, because it's kind of drying here, my dark value with white. So it's not super dark, not super light, right there in the middle. And start pulling some hairs a little bit more than what I'm seeing. Taking the information from the reference and kind of doing my own thing here. Going along with that hair folding around the collar where we can't see it. And the lighter those hairs are on the top, the closer they look. They look like the top layer. And I want some of this hair to be layered in front of the bell and around it. And then of course, again, we're going to cover up this area with the fur on top as well. Now what creates depth with this fur is having the shaded area above it. So it indicates that curl, and that's what we need to add in if you don't have enough there. So with our darker gray, I'm just going to cut down a little bit into our medium and light grays, into those lines, to add a bit more of a shadow there. And I'll also reestablish this shadow here, which is just another bit of chunk of fur. And then I'll go back to my lightest value, that's almost white, and add those subtle highlights over top the lines I've already created. I'll even pull a few lines up into that shadow with the lightest value, especially in here. I'll also carefully lighten up and slightly thicken up this curving horizontal line here. And a little bit more up here. Bring them up a little higher too. Now to add to this shadow, like just to add contrast, I'm going to add the smallest little bit of black to this dark gray to get that shadow even darker. And I'll just create lines around this circular bell. And if I need to, pull some of the dark gray, the original dark gray in there, so it kind of blends out. Even up in here, get that darker too. Leaving some of the negative space where we already added this dark value there. I'm just going to mix up some more of the dark value. Maybe a little bit underneath here, but not much. And then back to my original dark gray to refine it. Now looking back at this, I think this is an area that's ready, complete. I can move on to the face area with the grays. So for you, if yours looks done, I recommend you bypass the next couple steps and get started on that face. I might have brought that down a little too far, but we'll see. I now have the mix between my dark value and my light value. Kind of play with it. Try a few lines, step back, and see what you think. I'm going back with my medium value on the side here once more. Back with my light value. All right, so now I see what I need. I have to mix up more of the medium value with I'll just use white and my dark value. That's just white and a dark value. Cutting in between and refining, just getting a bit more of the darkness on this lower left. Especially a little bit more darkness down here. Okie dokie, so I think we're ready. I'm gonna remix our gray values and we can start working on the white fur on the face. So if you don't have your dark value, let's mix up some more. It doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close to it. It's good that you have a range of values. Just try your best to get it close enough. That's white with black for our dark value. Mix up enough in case you have to go back to this fur down here. We're gonna start working over top here. I'll pick some of that up, add some more white to it. To get our medium value, and then what's left on my brush plus lots of white. So it's basically white, but not 100%. That'll be the light value. All right, so I got my liner brush, and no, I don't think I'll do that yet. I think I'll go to my liner brush after the cat stung brush, just like we did here. Make sure it's clean and damp. Go to the dark value, darkest side of the face first, right here. And I exaggerated this chin a little bit more. It kind of blends in with this fur around the cheeks, so I'm gonna see how we can do that, but still not lose that chin at the same time. So this would actually be too dark on this side. So I'm gonna do a mix between our dark value and medium value. Is that too dark? No, that's actually okay. And this is the tricky part, doing this where we don't lose our line here. I know we lost a lot of it when we were cutting up into it, but I'll just go up to about there. Then I'll start working inside the mouth where it's dark. And with just the medium value, so just the medium value, I'll start painting that in on the left side. And on the chin with the medium value, with the point of my brush, still allowing the outer edge to be the white of our canvas, because that's where we'll go back with our liner brush and do that and put back in those proportions. So let's go on with just our medium value with our liner brush. It's actually not quite light enough. So let's go in with our light value and see what happens. Okay, I think that's what we need. Our light value is what we're using to cut over top this area and get those proportions right as well. It goes down and up and back down again. Following the direction of the fur, so it's kind of at an angle to the right on this side. I want to make sure I get the direction of the each line right. And as I do this, because this paint, we want to work steady so that it kind of blends in with those grays. So this is going to be doing some blending, pushing that dark value up a little bit, but still having some there, and then lightening up just line after line, all the way cutting into some of those dark browns even. So now I'm switching to, I'm still using the light value on the chin, but I will switch after I do the bottom of the chin. I'll switch to the medium value as I work up on this side. Because you see how it kind of gets dark around that left side of the face, so I'm going to go to the medium value. Blend that to about there. And then back to the light value where it gets much lighter on the right side. And as I work up, those lines should get not only lighter, but almost come to a point. And I don't want to pull them up too high to about there because it gets darker inside there, so you can't see too much. So I'm with my lightest value, by the way. So with my light value gray, I'm gonna lighten this up once more and again pull out those little strands into the dark brown. All right, so I'm gonna start with my lightest value, but then switch to my medium value because of the shadows on that left side. See how I'm bringing up these light values a little higher? Okay, now I'll go to my medium value gray. I'm going to wash off my brush because I'm going to work down and around here, carefully getting those lines, and that's with the medium value, getting those lines really fine. And now with the medium value, I'm working up. Also on the chin. And there's just a few little stray hairs here. I'm going to refine them a little bit more with the dark brown. I'm going to pull some of it off. And I'll also do some down here. If you made it too thick, we'll go back to the dark brown. Now another place we're going to need the dark brown is around this muzzle area on both sides. We'll probably have to bring that in after we do our layers of gray. So I'm going to go to, I'm actually just going to go back to, instead of my size 8 cast tongue brush, I'm going to go to my size 1 round brush. And I'm going to do something a little different, but similar to how I paint small areas, where I put the medium value and then I adjust it with the dark value. So let's try that with our medium value gray. I'm going to paint that in relatively quickly. This actually goes up a little higher. And I'm actually not going to bring it all the way down because I use my liner brush to get those strands. Okay, so back to my liner brush. And because this cat's design is just a squished in face, the rows of those little dots around the muzzle for the root of the whisker are also going to be angled up a little. Instead of kind of more horizontal like other breeds, it's going to be more angled. So I'm going to go to my dark value, and I'm just going to ballpark guess where these are. So right by the left nostril, down just a little bit, and do a row. So these are blob-like dots that are not super dark. I'll do another row below that, but in a little. And in the reference, it's kind of hard to make out that third row, but I will be adding it soon. After, I add just a little bit of shading below the left side of that nose and on the left part of the lip, just a little bit, blending it into that medium gray. Oh, I covered up some of my black, my very dark gray, so I'm actually going to put that back in right here. Back with my dark gray, because it's getting a bit of a shadow up there. Going back to my dark gray, I'll also add some right here. Little dots, like 3 rows of very blobby looking dots. And another area where we want to add this dark gray is like right up in here, just the shape of this muzzle. And I'm cutting off some of this, which will go over and reshape with their light values. Right at the corner there. Even on the top left there too. I brought it up a little higher. So it's like 1 bump, 2 bump, 3 bump, and there'll be a 4th bump down here that we'll get with our light value. Line after line, okay? So I'm going to carefully add these lines with our light value, cutting up and blending in with the medium value. So now what I'll also do is work up on the left side of that muzzle, working around and in between those dots for the root of the whisker, keeping these short and also leaving gaps so we still see the medium gray below it. Carefully making sure that creates a nice rounded shape. So we should just barely see the root of the whiskers. They should be partially covered up by these light gray lines. So I'm going to move to my size 0 round brush now to paint in this area. We'll do the same thing, starting with, and I'm going to make sure this is clean and damp, I'll go more on the dark side at the bottom with my dark value, but not going all the way to the edge. And then immediately going to my medium value, because I don't need too much of the dark value because of that light source being so strong. Barely left any outline of white there. Okay, so I'm with the medium value, and these lines are going just like we did here. They're going down into the right. And now I want to stay in my medium value to just paint this area in. So just like we did to that left side of the muzzle, we'll just paint this in with our medium value gray. All right, so with our medium value, actually, nope, with the light value, I love this part because this is where we add those random strands that go over top some of the browns and oranges. I'm going to pull some of these whites up more. There's little lines in the lower right by this right eye. Tiny little lines that kind of go out just like that. Don't want to make them too long or too thick. And then the angle changes now down into the right. I'll pull out some of these strands just like we did down here with a thin amount of white paint on there. My brush is getting too thick, so I'm going to wash it off. Also too much water in there. I'm going to pull that water off and go again with the white. All right, so the lines are going to cut up into this orange gray area or this orange brown. And carefully with this light value gray, I'm going to cut down into some of these grays that we did at the beginning. I'm going to go in with my medium value, get some there in the bottom. go back to my light value on the outer edge down here. Even pull out some more hairs out here. I'll even add a few on the top of the head. Go back to my dark value. For this other for the left side, I went to the dark value to create some lines. And then back to my lightest value, because I'm going to do line after line going the right direction over top our medium value gray. Leaving some gaps in between so you can see a little bit of that gray, but not much. I'll add some single lines up here. Use your finger if they're just a little too bright, too bold. You can pull some of that off. If you look close enough, I see a few white lines up here by the lip. Just a few. But I want to get that darker so it's consistent on the, like I did on the left side. So I went in with my dark gray just to get it a little darker down there. To the immediate right of that, I'm going back with my light value gray and just want to check to make sure both sides are symmetrical, both sides of the muzzle are very rounded and then curve back up again, and that they're nice and even. You don't have one side much larger than the other. All right, creative, so what we're gonna do is not waste this gray, because before we go around and really refine some of the browns and the oranges and yellows, I need to paint the inside of those ears. So I'm gonna test this out, see if this is too dark. This is our dark gray that we were using right down here. And I think that's gonna be perfect for the inside, and then we'll lighten up the outside. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going in one line at a time with my size 0 liner brush. As they go up the ear, they get a little bit shorter. They're much longer and more curled at the bottom. Now, as I move up, I'm going to go to my medium value for these inner ear hairs, my medium value now. And I'm also going over some of the dark gray lines, but not on the ends of them. That's where it's going to get the highlight. All right, and then they go up, they get shorter at the top. I'll even go to my light value gray and highlight the ends of them. I know that seems very tedious. It requires a very steady hand, but it sure does help create depth and show you that it's darker inside the ear and lighter outside the ear. Now, learn from my mistakes. What you want to try and avoid is having these perfect lines that are parallel to one another. You want lots of overlapping. You want to barely be able to make out the hair on the deepest part of the ear, but then really see those single strands on the outside, inside of the ear. In a moment, you'll see me crisscrossing some of these lines a bit more, just adding a few more lines, especially on the inside of it, and getting the outside lighter. All right, so now with my dark value, I'm going to test it out on the left ear now. We should probably very much see this stand out. Oh yeah. It's changing directions. Now, unlike that right ear where we have that brown strip as our guideline to where we're going to stop that hair, we don't have that on the left. So I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on the other side, making sure I stop it about the same width from the top of the ear like the other side. And then with some of them, not a whole lot, I'm going to go in with my medium value on some of the ends of the lines, going with that medium value gray. I'll just add a few more on this ear with the light gray. And with my medium gray, a few more on this side too. We even have, I just noticed this is so cute. We even have just the smallest, like shortest little strands, little hairs on the top of the ears. I'm not gonna add too many, and I'm gonna need to refine it. I just kind of messed that one up a little bit. On the top of the ear. I'll do that a little bit up here too. Oh, I'm so excited. This is the grand finale where we go in with our violet and we go in with our orange. And cadmium yellow. So we should have for this next step, raw sienna, yellow ochre, violet, orange, and cadmium yellow. And I'm gonna mix up similar colors as before. Instead of using raw umber, which is what some people will use, or even black to mix up the dark browns, I'm going with violet. And then raw sienna. So that's violet and raw sienna. So we are going slightly different, adding in more violets this time. I want to add in more violets to complement those yellows, and so that's why I'm not adding raw umber this time. Okay, I'll pull some of that aside. Add more raw sienna. Remember, we're trying our best to match the value, how light or dark it is, not so much color. We have been looking at the colors in this reference and following them, but not so much. So you can use any color in the rainbow if you're just following value. I'm going to do a mix of raw sienna, orange, yellow ochre, orange, and raw sienna. So that's yellow ochre, orange, and raw sienna. I'll add a little bit more yellow ochre and a bit of white to that. So that's just a bit of yellow ochre and white to that. I'm going to pull some of that aside, okay? Slightly different than before, is add a little bit of yellow ochre and white. And I want a deeper orange, so I'm going to go with orange and raw sienna. And that's more orange than raw sienna. So that's orange and raw sienna. And I'm going to start first with my liner brush, make sure it's clean and damp, with our dark brown to pull this down over top, and make sure, test it out so it's not too dark. That's actually a little too dark, so I'm going to pull in a little bit of this raw sienna mixture. And while I'm here, I'll also do the refining around the white strands that I made. So what I mean by that is I'll clean this line up just by thinning it out. And if your brown looks a little bit more purple, that's great. You're getting more colors in there. Or if it looks a little too dark, just add more raw sienna in it. And if it's too brown, just add a bit more violet to it. Okay, so now I'm pulling in more raw sienna because I want to join it, getting some of these lighter browns up here. I'll just do a little bit more of that, this bottom area here. Bring it down just slightly. I'll also touch up this area just so it looks nice and even. I'm going to add just random stray browns right at where it'll go over some of the grays. See how I did that? I just brought a few in right by the grays. Just gonna clean up some of these white lines. And on this side too, I brought some up. I can also bring some down. Ooh, I love that. You see what I just did there? Just a few lines hugging around this left side of the muzzle and cutting in down and to the left on this side. I'm gonna go, just for a quick bit, I'm gonna go to this lighter yellow. I might bring in some raw sand. Let's pull in some raw sand into that so it's not too bold. And I'm just gonna get a little bit of this right here. Sporadic lines of this yellow. More than I'm seeing in the reference. Single lines that have big gaps in between. And that's a mix of our yellow and the brown. Because with calicos, we have like big, strong markings that are bold, but then we have these random hairs that are sporadic of different colors. And that's what I'm doing now. I'll do a few of those up here, connecting with this light area above the right eye. I'm going to mix up more into this yellow brown to pull out these yellows here. I'm going to extend it up a little higher. I'm curving it too along this cheek. And why not? Let's just add a few over here of this yellow brown. Barely, just skimming my canvas, hardly touching it. Just a few lines will do. I'll add some here where we already added those light browns, but now we're just pulling out the yellows. That's actually a little too dark for that area. So I'm going to add more white to it in a corner just to lighten up the yellows on the muzzle. Added even more white to that. And then carefully, very carefully with the clean damp brush, I'll add single lines of this light yellow over here and up. Not too many. We don't see too many on this side. I think I'll just add a few up here. Yeah, I don't like the ones I added up there. Easy, I can fix those just by going back to our dark value brown and cutting it around them or painting over them entirely. But I want something up there, so I'll go back and add this brown. Oh, I'm not liking that brown. Let's see if I add white to that. Add a little bit of white to that to lighten up this brown. Okay, it looks a little too dark over here. I'm going to add some of these browns over here, sporadic. And this looks more like a highlight as opposed to just little strands of different colored hair. And that's good. That's definitely what we want there. Aha, I see what I need. We need to bring up this brown. This brown needs to be layered now that the inner ear hairs are there. Let's grab our dark brown and carefully draw them up over top the bottom of the ear. Now, anytime we're working with a dark value and the area behind it is much lighter, it's really going to show. Take your time. Make sure these lines are up high enough where they reach those inner ear hairs, but not higher than the hair at the bottom of the left ear. And I want to make sure the length is the same. I think it's a bit shorter on this left side, so I'm going to extend out just ever so carefully some of these browns on this left side. Even refining some of these cheek hairs on the side of the cheek. Aha. Remember we did those lines on the top of the ear with a little bit of hair sticking out? I'll do that with this dark brown on both ears. I'm gonna mix some of this brown because I added that brown but then extended up the dark brown hairs, so I need to go over some of these dark brown hairs. And what we use to lighten up the dark brown hairs is our brown mixture here, the lighter brown mixture with some added white. And I'll pull that up into some of those darker browns we just added. And I went down a little too far with my dark strands. I'm gonna put that back in with a mix of my yellow and the brown right here. I'm gonna climb up a little higher, carefully pulling it around the side. So just carefully going over some of those dark brown hairs. I'm gonna go add that same color, okay guys? A mix between the yellow and the brown. Add just a little bit around the body here. Not too much, just a little bit, random strands. Especially at the bottom where you made it a little bit lighter. Back with my dark brown, and I just want to clean up the back hairs again. Do some more refining over top the areas where I added those random white strands. Ooh, I even see here, I'm going to cut in between this area with some of this brown. Just a few lines to cut in between. I might have brought that up too high, going back to the yellow. And again, back to my brown. Until I get it just right. And there's like this dark pocket that almost looks like a dip in the hair, and that doesn't look quite right to me. So I'm gonna go back to this yellow brown with a clean, thin brush with a thin amount of this paint on it. A little too thin amount of paint. I'll go back to my dark gray, cut in around that. Dark brown, sorry, not dark gray. Cut in around some of the lighter colors here with some of those browns. I'll also pull up some of these light grays. I actually have some canvas missing there or exposed there. And I'll bring up some of these whites, just a few up here. I also want to highlight some of these ones over here. These areas on the far left where it's kind of lifted up and getting some more light. Around the muzzle, I'll work around the muzzle too with this white, very light gray. I might have made those a little too thick, so I'll go back with my dark brown, cut in along there. Ooh, that brings up something. This is too much of a line. We need to add some fur texture there. So I'm going to cut into there with this dark brown. And now with this deeper orange that we made, I'm going to test this out. I'm not quite seeing it too much. What if I go with a mixture of this raw sienna with a tiny bit of white? So it just barely shows up. I'm not digging it. I extended that out. I'll extend it out even more. And then I'll create more texture by cutting into it with the dark brown. That's how I'll solve that problem. So I'll just cut into it with the dark brown, creating that texture. So I see an area we can add a glaze. You might be able to tell this eyelid just pops out. It's just too prominent. So I'm going to make a glaze by watering down, adding water to this dark brown. And let's just push it back now. Push it back by adding this right over top there. So it's not as strong. And then let's go back with our dark brown without the glaze. And strengthen the area, the darkness above and around it. Even go back with that glaze, add some right over here. And then back to the dark gray to even cover some of that up. The dark brown, the dark brown. Now it's nearly time to start adding in those whiskers. I just want to encourage you to step back and look at your piece, see what yours needs, which might be a little different at this point from mine. I'm going to go back to that brown glaze and actually add it a little bit on the left of the eye, tone down the lightness on that eye. I'll go back to this brown, mix it with some of this dark brown. So this is the lighter brown with the dark brown and a little bit of white. I'm going to add more of these highlights. We added them before. I'm just going to add them a little bit to cut in around the dark values we just added around the eye. And a few above. Maybe just a little bit more white in with these two browns. I'm definitely getting this highlight in below this left eye. And a little bit above. We mustn't forget to also add the dark brown hair above the bottom of the left ear. We're not going to need much, but we still want to make sure that it's consistent with both sides. And I'm even going to climb up with this brown, the top right of this left ear. All right, so I just can't resist. I have to go in with some abstract colors. I'm going to test out lavender, a light violet. I'm going to make this a medium value because I find when I'm doing this at the end, I start with a medium value and then get a little lighter or darker. And I'm just going to find some areas where there's already a medium value, and I'm going to add it there, like right over some of these browns. Where it just needs a little bit of life. If you don't like it, then you can paint right over it. I'm adding some to the body. Ooh, it looks so nice next to the yellows and oranges. Yep, you can always go back to your dark brown if you just want to get rid of some of the purples. I might want to add a little bit more yellow by adding this yellow orange that we made with cadmium yellow. Pull out a little bit of the yellow there, just a bit. Maybe even here too. All right, creatives, we're getting close to adding those whiskers. I just want to refine the fur texture here above the left of the muzzle. Also add a bit more texture, get rid of some of those gaps at the bottom of the right ear with this dark brown. And then you want to let your cat dry for about 5-10 minutes so that it's not wet when we're adding the whiskers. Okie dokie, guys, we are ready to add those whiskers. I've just cleaned my water. We're gonna need that clean damp liner brush, and hopefully you still have more light gray. These whiskers go in all funky directions. They are very thick and very long. So with a steady hand, I'm gonna work on the right side because I'm right-handed. I find that's easier to do whichever side you're, whether you're left or right-handed, start on that side. Build that confidence and then do the other side. Sometimes I go about halfway and then pick it up again as I relieve the pressure off my brush. To get that nice thin end. This is gonna, we won't even see this whisker over top this white fur, but I do see there's some hairs that actually go down. And I'm gonna have this one go down and curving out. So again, you're not going to see some of these whiskers down here. You're only going to have to go over the brown part. Oh, it's a little thick. If you make it too thick, you can always thin it out with some brown. I'll show you. You just cut in right along that whisker. So I'm going back with my brown. I'm going to thin out those two areas. Like there. I even have a little gap in between. I don't really want that. Try your best to not have any gaps. And when you add them in, just do your best. That's all you can do, right? That is all you can do. And then you want the very tip to be the thinnest part of the whisker. That worked out well. And I think I'll go to the left side now. Now that I've built my confidence and my hands ready and practiced, I can oftentimes, I'll go about halfway, move it towards the muzzle, and then get the thinnest part, pick it back up again, getting the thinnest part on the end of that. Whiskers aren't easy. It sure does take practice, but the more you fear it, the more you'll shake. All right, this one will go down to the left. I don't know if I've ever painted a cat with whiskers going in such different directions. Usually they're kind of like this. Ooh, this one like curls. Ooh, tricky. Notice I'm resting my hand to keep it steady. I like make a C with my hand, and it's the perfect stand as I'm painting whiskers. So we also have hairs up here. Yep, we gotta make those hairs up there. So I think I'll do one more here, and then I'll start doing those upright hairs, whiskers. Excellent. So now these kind of go up and to the right. I'll start on that side, and they start around where the yellow markings are, the yellow fur. I almost don't want to do more hairs. I think I'll leave it at 2 on that side. There's one that's so long. I'll have it overlapping the ear partially. You kind of want them on the same plane, and I think I have to bring these down. And fix it again with my darks. And I think it just draws attention to this line here a little too much. So I'm going to go back to some of the yellows, add a few in between that line. That helps. I'll even bring this marking up a little. And now with my gray, I'm just gonna carefully go over this one so there's not a gap in between. And I think I will need to refine it with the dark brown. Maybe a little bit more, but with the lighter brown in there, right here where it's a little lighter. I think I just am gonna need a little bit of dark brown. See how there's a little bit more of a shadow than we have. And getting that darker too on that side. Let's do that. Let's just get that a little darker on that side. Even between some of the whiskers. All right, creatives, so that wraps it up for this tutorial. I'll add a bit in the upper left corner below the left ear. If you feel comfortable and you're part of the private YouTube community, be sure to share it there, spread that inspiration and that creative joy. Guys, thanks for watching. Have a blessed day. Bye.